I would recommend that for all of the models, so that way you can have something to study on, because these will be the models that are taped for the practical. So there won't be any surprises. If you know what things are, you know what they are. Okay, so I'll go ahead and start with this one. So this is a model of the digestive tract wall. This right here is the lumen. So if you can imagine a matching one of these, going the other direction. So the chyme is going through here, okay? So, and then this is the outer part of the digestive tract wall. So this is going to be what's in contact with, the other organs in the abdominal area. But this is the lumen here. So got to keep that in mind, because I think that's while it's a fairly basic thing, it's a very easy thing to forget and to get things flipped around. So this is the lumen. Each one of these is a villi, not a microvilli. These are the villi. If we had some Velcro stuck to the outside of these, that would be a good representation of the microvilli. Okay, but each of these is a villi. These cells that you see here along the edge, that is the epithelium. What kind of epithelium do we have in the digestive tract wall? Simple columnar epithelium. Okay, simple columnar. So on this one, I want you to be careful, because the colors here do not match up with the colors on the other model. So don't learn things just by the colors. Make sure you know the structures. So in here, these blue things are the nuclei of each of those columnar cells. The goblet cells in this are represented just by some of these bigger gaps that open up to the lumen. So these are goblet cells. Right here, this is a blow up of what we call the intestinal crypt, and here this light blue is representative of the goblet cell, and the dark blue are the nuclei. Okay?
Which was the intestinal crypt?
This area right here.
Okay.
And so this is a blow up of that, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Okay, so we've got the epithelium. Just deep to the epithelium, or just a little bit more superficial actually, because this is the most deep. In here, and it's kind of hard to point this out, but basically all this peach in the background, that's the lamina propria, okay? So we have the simple columnar epithelium, and then the lamina propria is made of areolar connective tissue. So for the practical, you do need to know tissue types. So we've got the lamina propria, and then coming down here, we have the muscularis mucosa. So that's a smaller muscular layer that's just going to move those local villi around, those local pleats and folds. From the muscularis mucosae up to the lumen, that is the mucosal layer. Okay? This yellow structure right here, again, don't learn it by the color, but on this model it is this yellow one. That's the lacteal. Remember, that's where products of from fat digestion are going to be absorbed, and that is a lymphatic vessel. Okay, so here we have this dip in the intestinal wall. That is called the intestinal crypt. In the stomach, we have what's called gastric pits, and they're going to contain some similar things. So here's an intestinal crypt. Here's a blow up of that. So we've got goblet cells in here, and then these red down here, you can call them one of two things. These are either going to be enzyme producing cells, and if they're enzyme producing cells, that would be your brush border enzymes. So you think sucrase, lactase, maltase, those things would be produced by those enzyme producing cells. You could also call those enteroendocrine cells. If you call them enteroendocrine cells, then you need to be thinking about the duodenal hormones. So that would be gastrin again, GIP, VIP, things like that. So we can't tell a distinction on the model between the enzyme producing cells or the enteroendocrine cells. So if on the practical one of these were marked, you would have a choice which of those you want to put. But then if there's a follow-up question, name something that this cell produces, make sure that your answers match. If you say it's an enzyme producing cell and then something that it produces and you say GIP, that's not correct because you said enzyme and then you named a hormone. Does that make sense? So make sure that that matches for that. Okay, so then moving a little bit more superficial, this layer right here, so here it's represented by this peach layer, that is the submucosa. The submucosa is made up of dense irregular connective tissue, and that's where you're going to find your larger blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, nerves, things like that. And then moving even more superficial, you've got your muscularis externa. The deeper layer is the circular layer. The more superficial is the longitudinal layer. Don't go by what this looks like here as far as the texture that's on the model. For one thing, on these two models, we've got different cuts. So these are going to look like they're backwards between the two models. Just make sure you know that the deeper layer is the circular layer, the more superficial layer is the longitudinal layer, regardless of what it looks like on here. And then the last layer you have, the most superficial, that is the serosa. The serosa is made up of simple squamous epithelium with an underlying areolar connective tissue. If we were in the esophagus, what would you call this?
Adventitia.
The adventitia, exactly. Okay, so I think that's got that one covered. So now we're going to go through all that same stuff again, just on the other model, because we will probably have things taped on both of them. So,
I have a question.
yep.
For the serosa, you said simple squamous epithelium, and then something about.
So there's an underlying, it's connected with areolar connective tissue. And this model will show that just a little bit better. Okay, so again, we've got an intestinal wall model.
Much prettier.
It is very pretty, it's very colorful, very nice. And like you said, this one is going to be more accurate as far as proportions, things like that. So again, the lumen is here. Each one of these is a villi. This pink here, that's the epithelium, again, simple columnar epithelium. Now something different, like I said, don't learn things by the colors. On this model, each of those blue dots represents a goblet cell. Okay, so don't get confused between the blue dots here and the blue dots there. Okay, so those are goblet cells. The gray in the background, that represents the lamina propria. Right here, this green, that is the lacteal. Again, that is a lymphatic vessel. Right here we have our intestinal crypt. So we don't have the big blow up on this one, but you can see those cells down in there. So we've got goblet cells in here. What do goblet cells produce? Mucin. Don't say mucus. They produce mucin. It's not mucus until it combines with water. And then we have either those enteroendocrine cells that produce hormones, or the enzyme producing cells that produce enzymes. Then we have the muscularis mucosa. You can see how thin it is relative to this other one. This is more, again, this is more accurate. So this is a very thin muscle layer. That muscularis mucosa just moves the local pleats and folds. This right here is the mucosal layer, the mucosa. Coming down here, we have the submucosa. So that's in here, it's this gray, thick gray layer. This blue thing is a Peyer's patch. So if this is a Peyer's patch, most likely what part of the digestive tract are we in?
Ileum.
The ileum, good job. Okay, so again in the submucosa, that's where you've got your large lymphatic vessels, blood vessels, things like that. Then coming down here, you have the muscularis externa. It is this whole thing. Right here, you've got your nice big circular layer, and then here is your longitudinal layer. And then, moving down here, so looking at the underside, this right here is the serosa. So here you can see that simple squamous epithelium, and here would be that, the areolar connective tissue that connects it. Okay? So it makes more sense, yeah. Any questions on either of these? Yeah.
So just to make sure, from the blue part down to this pink part, that's all the serosa?
That's all serosa.
And
Mhm.
you said, just to make sure, simple squamous, and then the yellow is areolar.
Yeah, there's yellow, and there's some blue there too. That's also part of the areolar connective tissue.
Okay.
So this is the epithelium, and then everything there.
It's all areolar?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Other questions?